Hey guys, tonight we drift into the long twilight of the Viking world. You're wrapped up under your blanket, the light is low and outside, maybe the wind's whispering through some trees. Perfect, because tonight we're leaving the battlefield and walking quietly beside men once feared across Europe, men who traded their axes for aprons, their war cries for soft, snoozy sighs of home life. It's the boring history for sleep, and we're exploring the strange career paths of retired Viking warriors. You can practically smell the salt on your skin, the faint staleness of old leather armour, and the scent of roasted barley on the wind. After decades at sea, smashing monasteries and arguing over mapeless directions with cousins named Bjorn, you've finally come home. Your back aches, not from battle, but from carrying sacks of grain. Your knees complain every time you stoop to milk the goats, but hey, at least no one's trying to spear you before breakfast anymore. You probably wouldn't survive this shift, no offence. Because while modern retirement might mean golf, hammocks and Sudoku, Viking retirement meant manual labour, aching hands, and a village that expected you to know things like soil acidity and how not to offend your goat. And let's just say, Viking goats don't play. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a low green valley. The fjord behind you is quiet, dotted with boats that haven't seen war in years. One of them is yours. Once etched with runes and the scars of foreign coastlines, it's now half buried beside the boathouse. Your hands are still calloused, though the sword's gone dull. Your enemies are barley roots now. You squat, and the soil's rich. This land, this patch of Norway or Iceland or even parts of the British Isles, is yours. Vikings were not, contrary to popular belief, just barbarians itching for violence. They were also settlers, farmers, and homemakers. Yes, you heard that right. Many warriors, once their youthful enthusiasm for swinging iron had waned, returned to ancestral lands to live out quieter lives. And for a people who'd once burned down villages, they got surprisingly into compost. One mainstream historical fact that often gets overlooked: farming wasn't just a fallback for Vikings, it was the default. Raiding was seasonal. Between expeditions you were expected to tend fields, fix fences, and make sure your cows hadn't wandered off into someone else's saga. Historians agree that most Viking warriors were, in fact, part-time fighters and full-time landowners or labourers. Your new day starts before dawn, not with a horn blast, but with the muffled sound of a cow kicking a gate. You wrap your fur-lined cloak around your shoulders. Yes, you still wear it, because let's face it, you look amazing in it, and head outside. There's grain to thresh, firewood to stack, and a roof to thatch before winter makes itself comfortable. Again, you shovel out the sheep pen, and for a moment you think back to that time you looted a Frankish abbey and accidentally set your trousers on fire. Ah, the good old days. But it's not all mud and manure. The harvest brings gatherings. You host neighbours, share barley ale, and tell stories from the old campaigns. Younger folks sit cross-legged around you, wide-eyed. You pause to chew on a hunk of bread, pretending to forget the next part of the story. They lean in, you smile, you still got it. Historians still argue whether this post-war lifestyle was one of personal choice or economic necessity. Did you settle because you wanted peace? Or because your knee gave out after that fight with the Irish guy in a helmet shaped like a fish? Honestly, it's probably both. Retired Viking warriors didn't just vanish, they became the backbones of their communities. And unlike in modern tales, retirement didn't mean idleness. You taught boys how to till, and girls how to shoe a horse. You argued over fence lines and water rights. You mended tools. You sneezed your way through hay storage. You were present, saw, and shockingly respected. One odd tidbit: Viking farmers often buried relics from their warrior past under their fields. Swords dulled and bent, bits of chainmail, fragments of shields, tucked beneath barley and rye like forgotten trophies. Archaeologists find them now and scratch their heads. Why here? Maybe it was superstition. Or maybe you just wanted your sword to do one more battle with the mole problem. You glance at your hand. Once it held an axe so heavy it would terrify most gym bros. Now it holds a bundle of leeks. Less glorious maybe, but you sleep easier now. No screams, no fires, no endless motion on a tossing sea. Just wind, sheep, and the slow, ancient rhythm of the soil. And honestly, you wouldn't trade it back. You're elbow deep in grain sacks when you hear it. The familiar creak of a dock rope straining under a boat's weight. You glance up, wiping sweat from your brow, and smile. Another former warrior has returned, his beard streaked with grey, and he's walking with the awkward stiffness of someone who's spent too many nights on cold planks. But his eyes, like yours, scan the fields with relief. He's home too. After years of looting, pillaging, and trying not to die on foreign soil, a surprising number of Vikings turned to trade, and not just bring me some silver and I'll give you a goat kind of trade. No, we're talking well-organised routes stretching across Europe, Byzantium, and even into parts of the Islamic world. These weren't just brutes. They were businessmen with sore backs and a keen eye for shiny things. You hitch up your belt, still decorated because vanity never retires, and head toward the dock. A quick nod, a grunt of mutual understanding, and you both start unloading wares from his ship. Walrus ivory, silk, maybe a strangely shaped jar he swears came from Constantinople. You pretend to know what it's for. Secretly, you're still trying to figure out how to open it without breaking it. Retired warriors becoming merchants may seem odd, but it made perfect sense. You already knew how to travel, you weren't afraid of bandits, and you had extensive networking experience. Okay, maybe it involved fire and axes, but still. You also had the respect, or at least the cautious admiration, of everyone from Dublin to Novgorod. One mainstream historical fact: the Vikings established extensive trade connections, especially through the rivers of Eastern Europe. The Dnieper and Volga were practically Viking highways, linking the chilly north with the riches of the east. Coins from Baghdad and beads from India have been found in Scandinavian graves. So, yes, you may now be selling dried fish and ale at the village market, but don't let that fool anyone. You've seen more of the world than the local chieftain's daughter's embroidery sampler suggests. Your neighbour, the new arrival, was once a berserker. You remember him foaming at the mouth in battle, hurling himself at shield walls like a man who'd misplaced his sense of self-preservation. Now, he's haggling over sheep prices like a disgruntled grandmother. You sip your ale and raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Better this than dying with frostbite on your helmet. And yet, beneath the linen tunic and the grumbling about barley tariffs, there's still something wild behind his eyes. He talks too quickly when he mentions the Black Sea. His hands twitch when he sees the village boys practicing with wooden swords, but he's trying. Like you both are. Historians still argue whether Viking trade evolved as a fallback once raiding became politically inconvenient, or whether it was always part of the plan. Was the axe ever separate from the scale? Perhaps not. Even in their prime, Viking ships often carried both goods and weapons, just in case. Kind of like bringing a lunchbox and brass knuckles to work. One fringe tidbit: some retired warriors even became full-time translators and cultural mediators. Having picked up phrases in Old English, Frankish, Slavic dialects, and maybe a prayer or two in Greek, you were uniquely suited to keep feuding sides from tearing each other apart. Or, more often, to help them strike a deal over how not to. You remember a long ago summer at a riverside outpost, trading beaver pelts for eastern spices, arguing over salt weights, teaching a boy from Kiev how to curse in Icelandic. You laugh quietly at the memory, then hand your neighbour a smoked fish. He nods. Thanks. Tastes like warhorse, but it's good. You both sit on overturned barrels watching a couple of kids drag fishing nets across the pebbled shore. One of them asks what a russ is. Your friend starts to answer, then pauses. It's complicated. Because retired Viking traders helped create entire cultural identities, The word Rus, which gave rise to Russia, likely came from Norsemen who settled and ruled Slavic regions. So yeah, you're technically a former warlord/merchant/unwitting geopolitical influencer. Try fitting that on a runestone. You head home at dusk, your cloak smelling faintly of herring and old rope. As you pass your fields, you glance at the scarecrow you dressed in an old helmet. It's ridiculous. You love it. Inside, your wife has baked bread, and the stew smells faintly of juniper. You sit, stretch your knees with an audible pop, and say grace in 2 languages. She rolls her eyes. You smile. There's peace here, even if the dog still steals your boots. You wake up before sunrise, like always. Old habits die hard. Even if the only ambush coming today is the one your bladder staged at 4 a.m. You ease out of bed, step onto the cold floor, and listen to the silence of your home. No battle cries, no snapping sails, no ominous thunder signalling that Thor is in one of his moods. Just the gentle creak of old wood and the smell of yesterday's fish stew lingering in the air. Today, you've got an unusual task. You're heading to the neighbouring village to help construct a community hall. Not exactly a battlefield, but still a site of action. One where your skills as a shipbuilder are suddenly relevant again. Because yes, another strange path for retired Viking warriors, construction and shipwright work. You were already trained to build seaworthy longships that could survive everything from North Sea storms to accidental whale collisions. So turning that skill toward barns, halls and trading posts wasn't such a stretch. Besides, there's something oddly satisfying about carving a beam that won't try to stab you in the ribs. You swing your axe, not for raiding but to shape wood. It's sharp, familiar and comforting. The handle fits your hand like it always has. You can almost feel your old crew's rhythm in the stroke. 1, 2, shift. 1, 2, rest. Except now, instead of chanting war songs, your fellow workers mutter about where the chickens keep disappearing to. Mainstream historical fact. Viking shipbuilding was an intricate, revered craft. Entire families specialised in it, and even warriors who didn't build learned enough to repair sails, patch hulls and shape oars. When the long voyages ended, many turned those skills toward land-bound projects, particularly in Iceland, where forests were sparse and every plank mattered. Fringe tidbit of the day, some Viking retirees even designed wooden skis. Yes, skis. Scandinavians had an early love of sliding around on snow-covered terrain, and someone had to make sure you didn't accidentally spear yourself on a birch tree. One retired warrior in Norway supposedly built a set for his grandchildren with carved wolf heads at the tips, for style, obviously. You arrive at the site, a half-finished timber hall, its skeleton glowing in the golden morning light. You run your hand along a support beam, testing for splinters. The village head nods as you approach. He's younger, polite, and trying to hide that he's mildly terrified of you. You like that in a manager. You're assigned to the main beam, centre of the hall, heart of the structure. There's something poetic about it. Once, you were the centre of a shield wall. Now you're the centre of something that might host a wedding or two. Less screaming, more stew. As you work, your mind drifts back to another construction project. One from your raiding days. It was a winter encampment in the forests of Francia. You built temporary shelters from pine and leftover fence posts, smoked meat over a communal fire, and slept under animal skins that still smelled like their previous owners. Someone tried to make a sauna. It collapsed. You still tease him about it when he visits for mead. Historians still argue whether retired Vikings actively sought these peacetime crafts or were gently nudged into them by communities desperate to stop seeing everything as a potential battlefield. Did warriors settle down because they wanted to, or because they were too valuable alive and sober? Either way, the work helps. Your hands know what to do. The rhythm settles into your bones. Occasionally a kid sneaks close to watch. You let him hold the chisel. He beams like you've just knighted him. Later, he brings you a pine cone and calls it payment. You accept graciously and tuck it in your belt. Currency is evolving. At lunch, you and your co-workers, sit on a log and share dried apples and smoked eel. One guy used to be a scout. Now he's the unofficial team poet. He recites a saga about a carp who cursed an entire fishing village. It's terrible. You all laugh until eel juice dribbles from someone's nose. In the afternoon, someone drops a beam, and it nearly crushes a pile of tools. You bark orders automatically, instinct kicking in. The younger workers fall in line without question. The danger passes. They cheer. You're embarrassed. A little proud, too. As the sun dips, you inspect the day's work. It's not glorious, but it's good. Solid. Something that'll stand through storms and weddings, arguments and songs. You pat the beam once, same way you used to pat the prow of your ship before sailing into the unknown. You start walking home, whistling tunelessly. On the path, a raven watches you from a tree. You wink at it. Old habits again. When you arrive home, your wife is shelling peas. She looks up. Don't bring wood chips into the house. You kiss her cheek anyway, shake out your tunic and sit. The pine cone from earlier falls out of your belt. She raises an eyebrow. Another bribe from your fan club? You grin. You lean back, stretch your shoulders, and feel the pleasant ache of honest work. Not glory, maybe, but something even rarer. Contentment. You wake up with a crick in your neck and the soft thud of someone knocking on your door. Not an emergency. Just Hrolf, the beekeeper turned former berserker, arriving to drag you into another of his retirement schemes. You sigh, tie your cloak loosely and grab your walking stick. Not because you need it, just because it makes you look distinguished. Today's adventure? Beekeeping? Yes, seriously. It turns out more than a few former Viking warriors, especially the ones with poor knees and a deep love of honey, took up apiary work in their golden years. You shuffle out into the brisk air, your breath misting. Rolf is already waiting with a lopsided grin and what appears to be an entire bee veil made from an old fishing net. He looks like he's about to battle ghostfish. "Ready to meet the queens?" he asks, wiggling his eyebrows. You stare at him deadpan. "That's the best you've got?" He shrugs. "It's early." You walk together to the edge of the village where a row of beehives sits neatly beneath some alder trees. The bees are already buzzing, busy and indifferent to the fact that two ex-warriors are now fumbling through the art of honey cultivation. Mainstream fact of the day: beekeeping in the Viking Age was surprisingly widespread. Honey wasn't just for mead, it was also a key sweetener and used in rudimentary medicine. Wax was even more valuable, used for candles, seals and waterproofing gear. Retired warriors, with their knowledge of forest terrain and calm under pressure temperaments, well, theoretically, were surprisingly good candidates for the trade. You stand still as Hrolf approaches one of the hives. He hums softly to avoid alarming the bees. "They can smell fear," he whispers. "So can goats," you reply, "and I'm more afraid of them." He chuckles. "Fair." You hold the smoker while he gently lifts the lid. The scent of burning herbs mingles with warm wax and sunlight. Inside, thousands of bees cluster like shimmering gold armor. It's mesmerizing. You're used to blood and steel, but this is an army of wings and patience. Hrolf starts explaining their hierarchy. The queen does her thing. The drones laze about. The workers run the show. It's oddly familiar. Like a longship crew, if everyone were really into flowers. Historians still argue whether Viking beekeeping was imported from Slavic neighbours or developed independently, Hrolf mutters. Either way, they'd better appreciate this honey. I got stung in the ear last week. Quirky tidbit. There's a saga fragment about a Viking who claimed to have trained bees to guard his home, like flying watchdogs. Likely exaggerated, unless he also trained them to write tiny warning signs. But still, the idea of a buzz-based security system is charming. You help refill the feeders with warm sugar water, something the bees appreciate during lean months. You whisper to them, just in case flattery works. They seem unimpressed. Later you sit on an overturned barrel and sip fresh mead. The honey tastes stronger, wilder, warmer somehow. Maybe it's because you saw where it came from. Or maybe because you got stung 3 times and are now slightly delirious. Hrolf tells you he's naming his next hive after his 3rd ex-wife. She was always buzzing around, causing trouble. You nod. She sting you too? He winces, emotionally. The two of you laugh, and for a moment you forget the weight of your years. You're just two old warriors swapping stories, sipping honey wine, and pretending bees aren't crawling into your socks. Later, you part ways. Your steps are slower, your fingers sticky. The scent of smoke and wax clings to your tunic. On the way home, you pass the young blacksmith struggling with a cracked bellows. He waves you over. You offer a few tips. Granted, some of them may involve cow intestines and prayer. Still, the kid nods gratefully. You carry on, feeling oddly useful. Back home, you scrape wax off your hands and tuck a jar of honey on the shelf. Your wife raises an eyebrow. More bee adventures, you nod. Fewer stings than the goats, she sighs. That's your standard now, you lean in. They made me king of Hive 3, she blinks. Do I bow? Only if you bring pollen. The fire crackles. The cat purrs from its perch on the bench. You settle into the quiet. The day was strange, sweet, and oddly productive. And somehow, the idea that ex-berserkers now spend their time tending fragile creatures with soft wings makes the world feel slightly more magical, or at least less likely to end in flames. The next morning you wake with sore knees and a faint scent of smoke still clinging to your cloak. A distant thump reminds you that the local wrestling circle is already warming up by the training fields, but you're not headed that way. No more full-body slams before breakfast, not after what happened to your back last solstice. Today you've got a different appointment, visiting Eric, the rune carver. He's an old friend, a former shield wall bruiser with biceps like tree trunks and surprisingly delicate fingers. These days he spends his time engraving stories into stone and wood, and occasionally bones. You trudge over to his hut, which smells like cedar, soot, and wisdom. Outside, his dog greets you by ignoring your existence entirely. Eric is hunched over a plank of birch, muttering to himself and chiselling a row of tiny straight lines. You wait for a lull before speaking. Is that the saga of your failed fish stew? He doesn't even glance up. It's a contract for a wedding chest, but now I'm adding a stew clause. Mainstream historical fact. Runes weren't just used for spells and cryptic omens. They were everyday tools for recording agreements, naming ownership, honouring the dead, and occasionally doodling. Viking warriors who survived long enough to retire sometimes became carvers, using their battle-honed precision and storytelling chops to record both heroic deeds and hilarious misfortunes. Eric gestures to a curved piece of whalebone on the bench. This one's going on a door frame. It's a house blessing, and a warning to borrow ale with caution. You smile. This is exactly what you came for. He hands you a blunt chisel and a test plank. Go on, write something useful. You press the tool into the wood, slowly carving a crooked line that might say strength, or might say bad soup. Either way, it's yours now. Historians still argue whether runes were taught in a formal sense or just absorbed by watching others, Eric says, pointing to an awkward carving from his early days. That one was supposed to say peace. It says peas. There's a rhythm to carving. Tap, pause, breathe. It's oddly meditative. You fall into it, letting your thoughts drift. Maybe you'll make your own memory stick someday. A staff carved with the names of your children, or a comb handle engraved with your best insult. Something poetic. Quirky tidbit. Some runestones contain what can only be described as graffiti, like one found in Sweden that basically says, Thor carved this, deal with it. Ancient mic drop. Eric stands, stretching his back with a theatrical groan. You know, some warriors believed carving runes into their sword hilts made the blade lucky. You raise an eyebrow. And did it? He shrugs. Define lucky. I still have all my fingers. You help him move a heavy slab of granite onto a workbench. It's meant for a local chieftain's grave, shaped like a tall, rough tooth with just enough surface for a heroic epitaph. Eric sketches a design with charcoal, letting the old stories guide his hands. You ask him if he ever carved anything just for fun. He nods and disappears into the back. When he returns, it's with a flat piece of driftwood that reads, please remove your boots, unless you're a god. You laugh until your ribs hurt. As you carve beside him, your hands begin to remember their strength, but in a softer way now. No need to crush, slice, or bash. Just press and glide. You find yourself whispering the letters as you make them. A quiet little chant. Later you sit by the fire, sipping warm barley broth. Eric tells a story about a warrior who carved a love rune for a woman in the next village. It backfired spectacularly when her 3 older brothers showed up instead. He carved a second rune that night, Eric smirks. It said, "Help." The light fades. You thank him and head out, the carved test plank tucked under your arm. You don't know what it says. You kind of hope it means something meaningful, but if it just says vegetable, that's fine too. On the walk back, you think about the strange dignity in this craft, about how warriors, no longer called to wield swords, turned instead to shaping memory. Not loud, not grand, just marks in wood and stone, meant to outlast all the yelling. As you pass the beekeepers' hives, the buzz is quieter now, the bees mostly tucked in for the evening. You smile at Hive 3, still the king technically. When you get home, you set the plank on your shelf. Your wife squints at it. "Is that a word?" You sigh. "It's abstract." She nods slowly. "You've become insufferable." "And rustic," you add. "Don't forget rustic." You sleep well that night. Maybe it's the carving, or maybe it's knowing your story, crooked letters and all, is still being written. The next few days pass in a gentle rhythm of chores and idle conversation, until someone knocks on your door with an idea that's just strange enough to be interesting. It's Bjorn, who used to swing a battle axe with one hand and carry a sheep with the other. These days he's got a different obsession: brewing. "Mead's fine," he says, barging in like this is still a longhouse and not your peaceful post-war cottage. "But what if we could make something spicier?" You raise an eyebrow. "Spicier mead?" He grins. "Or like warmer, something that kicks." You sit him down with a cup of lukewarm broth and try to understand what, exactly, he means. Apparently Bjorn's been experimenting. A little fermented honey, some dried berries, a suspicious root he swears isn't poisonous. Historians still argue whether Viking brewers used wild yeast intentionally or just kind of let things happen. You offer to help him test a batch, which is how you find yourself 2 hours later in a hut that smells like wet socks and cloves, staring into a bubbling cauldron and debating whether to toss in a pinch of seaweed for character. Mainstream historical fact: mead was the drink of choice in Viking culture, often brewed in small batches with honey, herbs, and whatever ingredients were on hand. It was served at celebrations, negotiations, and funerals. Brewing wasn't just a domestic task, it was a way of creating social bonds and showing hospitality. Quirky tidbit: some ancient recipes include herbs like yarrow, bog myrtle, or even tree bark, ingredients chosen for both flavour and their supposed mystical effects. Bjorn naturally adds all of them at once. You help him bottle the first batch, using reused seal bladders, because apparently glass is for monks. Each one is labelled with charcoal scribbles. Batch 1, don't drink alone. That night the village gathers to taste test. You watch as faces go from curious to impressed to deeply uncertain. One old man coughs, then raises a fist in approval. "Tastes like revenge," he wheezes. A woman down the row nods solemnly, like regret but cosy. Bjorn beams. You're starting to suspect this is exactly what he wanted. "Let's call it Winter Axe," he says. "Or maybe just what happened last night." Someone suggests selling it at market. Someone else suggests keeping it buried underground until the next plague. Later, as the fire crackles and everyone's slightly buzzed, a quiet young man plays a flute made of deer bone. The melody is slow and off-key, but oddly comforting. It weaves through the room like steam from the mead pot. You catch Bjorn whispering ideas for a stronger second batch. Maybe fermented turnip? You make a note to fake a family emergency before the next brew day. As the night winds down, you help an elder to their feet. They pat your shoulder and slur. You know, you don't always need a sword to be dangerous. You nod. Or to make someone cry. The following morning is foggy. You wake up in your neighbour's chicken coop wearing someone else's hat. Your wife isn't even surprised. "Bjorn's potion again?" she asks, handing you a basin of cold water. "Tell me you didn't say something embarrassing." "I may have offered to marry a barrel," you mumble. You trudge back to your own home, face tingling with embarrassment and possibly mild allergic reaction. But there's something satisfying about it all. This new kind of battle. Brewing instead of bashing. Serving joy instead of fear. Still gathering people, but with laughter and strange bubbling drinks instead of war cries. And somewhere in all this ridiculousness you start to realise the fight never really ends. It just changes shape. Your new weapon? A ladle. That evening, Bjorn drops by again, grinning. "You up for helping me with the labels?" You shake your head. "Only if I can name one, you'll regret this." He laughs. "Done." You sit together, sipping leftover mead, surrounded by scribbled parchment, herb bundles, and the faint echo of flute music from down the hill. Your hands are stained with honey. Your belly is warm. Your heart feels, dare you admit it, light. Not a bad afterlife, this retired life. Strange, sure. But better than being a memory carved in stone. You wake up to a goat nibbling your boot. This is less alarming than it once was. These days, retired Viking life seems to involve a lot more livestock in places they probably shouldn't be. You shoe it gently with your foot, then sit up and stretch. Your shoulders pop like the hinges on a long-neglected chest. Today's task? Something artistic. It all started when Torvald, a former berserker who used to bite his shield before battle, decided he needed a creative outlet. You assumed he meant woodworking, or singing. You were wrong. He started painting, on walls, on carts, on his own chest. "It calms the rage," he says, calmly applying crushed berry juice to a horse yoke in sweeping, slightly questionable spirals. Some say Odin painted the sky with blood and light. Why shouldn't I paint this chicken coop? Mainstream historical fact. Viking art wasn't just about swords and shields. Intricate designs, knots, animals, mythic scenes, decorated tools, ships, and personal belongings. Carvings and metalwork from the Viking Age reveal a culture rich in symbolic imagery, often blending the spiritual with the everyday. Fringe tidbit. A few unearthed items include what appear to be erotic carvings. Yes, even raiders had a sense of mischief. One comb discovered in Denmark has a very questionable scene involving a goat and a grin. Historians still argue whether these were fertility symbols, satire, or just the Viking version of bathroom graffiti. Torvald is definitely leaning toward the graffiti. You walk over to see his latest masterpiece, a mural of a longship sailing across a sea of... Wait, are those onions? Yes, he says, the sea of tears. Symbolic. Because I once cried while chopping onions. You nod. It's bold. Before long, other villagers join in. A young woman paints foxes dancing on her hut. An old fisherman tries his hand at carving a troll into the well post, though it looks more like a potato with fangs. You offer to paint something small, maybe a raven. It ends up looking like a sad turkey. No one minds. You find yourself laughing more than you expected. There's something freeing about creating for no reason other than the joy of it. Even the grumpiest warriors loosen up, slapping mud onto barn doors in swirls and circles that they swear represent warrior spirits. Torvald nods solemnly. The chicken coop now carries ancestral meaning. A visiting trader stumbles into the village and does a full circle, blinking at the polka-dotted sheep, the purple barns, the mushroom sculptures made of driftwood. "Is this a cult?" he whispers. You assure him it's just early retirement. He leaves with 2 jars of mead and a hand-painted spoon. Later, as you pass Torvald's hut, you hear him muttering through a mouthful of boar jerky. Maybe I should try tapestry next. The French do it. You pause. What do you know about French tapestries? Not much, he says. but I know how to stab things repeatedly, and that's basically embroidery. You offer to bring him some spare cloth. That evening, as the sky turns a sleepy lavender and mist curls around the hills, the village glows with strange beauty. Painted walls, carved stones, even coloured flags fluttering from trees. It's not war art. It's not even sacred. It's just weird, joyful clutter. And somehow, that's enough. Sitting by your door, you notice the goat from this morning chewing a corner of your painted shield. You sigh. At least chew the bad side. You close your eyes as the air fills with laughter, distant flute notes, and the occasional bang of someone knocking over a paint jar. There's still a fire in the village, just a different kind, one that warms instead of burns. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what Valhalla was always supposed to be. You wake before dawn to a sound you never expected again. Applause. Faint, polite, and entirely too synchronized to be goats clapping their hooves together. You rub your eyes, stumble toward the source, and find yourself facing a scene that would make Odin do a double take. It's a play, a Viking play. Sort of. A group of retired warriors, scarred, burly, with names like Grimhild and Bjorn Flatnose, are reenacting the time they accidentally invaded the wrong monastery, complete with wooden swords, dramatic gasps, and a papier-mâché sheep. Mainstream historical fact: Viking sagas were originally passed down orally through storytelling and poetic verse. These skalds, poets, were highly respected. Entertainment wasn't all blood and conquest. Tales of gods, ancestors, and wild mishaps were often performed with flair, exaggeration, and the occasional dance move. Today the skalds have been replaced by elderly raiders wearing bedsheets as togas and using a fishing net as a curtain. It's charming. Grimhild shouts, "I am Brother Edwin, and I beg you not to take our cheese." Bjorn, playing his younger self, raises his fake axe and yells, "Too late! I already took your soul!" A pause. "Line?" someone hisses. "Oh, I mean, too late. I already took your cheese." Much better. Fringe tidbit. There's evidence some Viking settlements had organised performances, possibly including religious ceremonies with elaborate costumes and music. Historians still argue whether these were sacred rituals, theatrical events, or just an excuse to dress up and roast someone with verse. You settle in on a stump with a mug of herbal tea. The audience includes 3 dogs, a half-asleep toddler, and a crow who seems very invested in Act 2. Someone plays a flute off key, which you suspect was never tuned to begin with. Torvald plays the narrator, dramatically pacing and squinting at his painted script. His artistic streak has evolved. Suddenly a minor scuffle breaks out backstage. 2 retired shield maidens are arguing over who gets to play the role of mysterious monk. One of them insists on wearing a fake beard. The other has brought real incense. "Authenticity matters," she declares, waving smoke in the other's face. You sigh contentedly. Later, during intermission, which is really just everyone eating pickled herring, you're approached by Ragnald. He's clutching a rough draft of a new play, Odin and the Mystery of the Lost Sandal. "It's a comedy," he says, "but with emotional depth." You agree to help with props. Soon, theatre fever grips the village. Every evening, the aging warriors gather to rehearse stories, share new verses, and argue about historical accuracy. Someone builds a puppet theatre for the kids, and someone else writes a tragic one-man saga about a man who only pillaged left-footed boots. Even the animals get involved. One goat now wears a cape and responds to stage manager. The real gift of it all isn't the performances, it's the joy of becoming someone else for a while, someone with no injuries, no regrets, and perfect comic timing. In one particularly unforgettable show, a dramatic storm scene is acted out using a bucket of water, a large fan, and 3 villagers banging on pots. It ends with thunderous applause and someone falling into a basket of rutabagas. You feel a pang of something old and familiar. Purpose, perhaps. Or just the deep satisfaction of building something together that no one needed, but everyone needed. As the curtain falls, literally it's attached with fishing hooks, the crowd disperses into the chilly night. You find yourself humming a tune from the show, something about Thor losing his pants in Scotland. It's not Broadway, it's better. You stretch out under a sky brushed with stars and listen to the lingering laughter, the clatter of wooden swords, and someone practicing lines with the emotional intensity of a Norse god getting dumped. Somewhere in all this, you think, is the truest form of peace a warrior can hope for. A story that keeps going, even after the fighting ends. You wake to the smell of something. Charred. Not smoke exactly. More like old dreams and pine tar. Turns out you've slept through a minor disaster. 2 would-be blacksmiths, both ex-berserkers with questionable vision, tried to rekindle their forge-building days, and built it backwards. Still, spirits are high. Retired Viking warriors have a way of turning every misstep into a tradition. So now, once a week, the village holds Backward Forge Day, where everything is done slightly wrong on purpose, helmets worn backwards, fish grilled tail first, and runes carved upside down. It's inexplicably fun. The smell is coming from a charred batch of pine cones someone tried to ferment into beer. You pass by with a polite nod. Mainstream historical fact: many Viking warriors, once too injured or aged for raiding, transitioned into blacksmithing, carpentry or tool-making. These weren't fallback jobs. They were marks of honour. Forging a dependable axe or ship rivet was just as heroic as wielding one. Fringe tidbit. Some Norsemen repurposed their raiding spoils, like melted down church bells or bits of armour, into jewellery, kitchen tools or garden decorations. One unearthed brooch in Sweden was likely once part of a Frankish sword. Historians still argue whether these artisans were seen as semi-retired warriors, or simply evolving into a different class altogether, more monk than mercenary, more maker than marauder. You follow the clanging sounds to the workshop, really just an open-air lean-to covered in soot and enthusiasm. Inside, Greta and Half Dan are attempting to mould an axe head, shaped like a fish, for balance. Half Dan turns to you. Want to try the bellows? You do? It's oddly satisfying, like helping a dragon breathe. Tools here aren't just practical, they're storytelling devices. A twisted nail from an Irish monastery becomes the centrepiece of a new door. A handle carved from reindeer antler bears runes that translate roughly to "Don't touch this, it bites." The forge becomes the village's beating heart. Veterans come and go, offering tips, laughing at each other's crooked blades, debating proper tongs technique. One old-timer insists on singing while hammering, and his song is mostly about pickled cabbage. Every object made carries a story. Even mistakes are honoured. The pot that melted into a pancake, the anvil someone carved with Bjorn was here in 4 different languages. There's something about the repetition, the hiss of water on iron, the rhythmic thud of hammers, that settles you. It's like breathing with the earth. And not just metaphorically. The ground is actually vibrating under your feet from the foot bellows Bjorn's kids are operating like a seesaw. By nightfall, a collection of new tools has appeared. Hooks, hinges, cooking spits, even a whimsical sculpture of Odin's beard made from horseshoes. Torvald calls it art. Everyone else calls it terrifying. You gather with the others around the forge's glow. There's stew bubbling in a blackened pot and someone passing around slices of bread that definitely contain chunks of charcoal for strength. The forge isn't just a job, it's a form of healing. A way to hold fire in your hands and reshape it into something useful, lasting, and kind of lopsided. As sparks rise into the night, you wonder what it means for a warrior to create instead of destroy. And then you stop wondering, because the answer is right in front of you. It means you're still alive. You find yourself wandering through a small Viking village on market day, the air thick with the scent of fresh bread and salty sea breeze. The usual sounds of blacksmiths hammering and children playing are softened today by the gentle hum of haggling voices. Retired warriors, now merchants, have set up stalls selling everything from dried fish to woven fabrics. Their eyes glint with the same determination they once reserved for battle, but their hands now expertly measure, weigh, and exchange goods instead of gripping swords. Mainstream historical fact. Many Vikings, after years of raiding and exploring, settled into trade. These merchant roles were crucial, connecting Scandinavia with distant lands through the extensive trade networks known as the Viking Age's long-distance commerce. Some retired warriors amassed wealth not by sword but by savvy deals. A quirky detail surfaces when you notice a grizzled old man, once feared on the battlefield, now enthusiastically peddling what he calls magic fish oil. According to him, a few drops could cure anything from hangovers to a broken heart. You can't help but smile, remembering how he once charged into battle without hesitation, but now haggles for a better price on smoked herring. Historians still debate how much Viking merchants influenced local economies versus the impact of raiding. Some argue the peaceful trading side was more significant than the pillaging legend suggests, but evidence remains murky. You wander past tables laden with exotic spices, strange textiles, and shiny trinkets from as far away as Byzantium and the Middle East. This is a far cry from the war camps you're used to, yet you can't help but sense the same spirit beneath it all: adventure, risk, and the thrill of discovery. At a corner stall you meet Freydis, once a shield maiden now running a modest bakery. Her rye bread is legendary in the village, rumoured to be as tough as Viking shields but twice as satisfying. She winks as she hands you a slice, joking that her secret ingredient is a pinch of old battle fury. The market buzzes with stories, laughter, and the occasional barter dispute settled with good-natured grunts rather than blows. You realise that for these veterans, commerce is just another kind of conquest, fought with wits and patience instead of axes and spears. As you leave the bustling market behind, the sun dips low, casting a golden glow over the village. You feel the quiet satisfaction that comes from watching warriors transform their legacy, not through violence, but through the rhythms of daily life and the simple exchange of goods. You stroll toward the coastline, where a small fleet of weather-beaten longships rest quietly in the shallow water. Once the vehicles of thunderous raids and daring escapes, they now serve a different purpose. Fishing vessels tended by retired warriors whose battle scars are replaced by calloused hands. The morning mist mingles with the salty air as fishermen prepare nets, their movements deliberate and calm. Mainstream historical fact. After their raiding days, many Vikings turned to fishing and maritime trade. Fishing was a vital part of Norse economy and culture, providing sustenance and goods for both local use and export. These men maintained their seafaring skills, but their quests were less about conquest and more about survival. A strange but endearing custom catches your attention. Some retired warriors decorate their boats with carved wooden figures called apotropaic masks, meant to ward off evil spirits and bad luck at sea. These masks are often comical or grotesque faces, a curious blend of superstition and humour that has become a signature of these peaceful fishing crews. Historians still argue whether these figures were purely symbolic or had a practical role in seafaring rituals. Some suggest they were meant to intimidate rival fishermen or even sea monsters, if you believe in such things. You watch as a group of fishermen share stories, their voices low and steady. They recall distant raids with a fondness not for the violence, but for the camaraderie, the feel of wind and wave beneath them. Now, their battles are against tangled nets and unpredictable weather. The fierce warrior spirit lingers, but it's tempered by patience. Nearby, a retired berserker named Sigurd shows off his latest catch, a massive cod that nearly pulls him into the water. His booming laugh fills the air as he struggles to haul the slippery prize aboard. You catch yourself thinking that some things, like the thrill of a good challenge, never really change. Fishing life also has its rituals. Before setting out, crews perform a quiet ceremony involving offerings of bread and mead to the sea gods, hoping for calm waters and full nets. The sense of respect for nature contrasts sharply with their former roles as raiders, highlighting how much these men have adapted. As you watch the sun climb higher, the fishing boats push off one by one, gliding over the gentle waves. It's a scene of peaceful industry, a far cry from the chaos of battle. Yet, beneath it all, You sense the same restless energy that once drove these men to cross oceans in search of glory. In this quiet harbour, you realise that retirement for a Viking warrior isn't about slowing down. It's about finding new ways to channel that enduring spirit. The scent of pine and damp earth draws you toward a dense forest, where retired Viking warriors have settled as hunters and woodsmen. You step carefully over moss-covered roots and fallen leaves, the forest floor soft beneath your feet. The chatter of birds is the only soundtrack, punctuated by the occasional thud of an arrow hitting its mark. Mainstream historical fact: hunting was a common pastime and essential source of food for Vikings, both during and after their raiding years. Veterans often took to the forest to track deer, boar and other game, honing their skills for survival rather than battle. A curious custom has emerged among these forest dwellers. Every successful hunt is celebrated by carving a small rune on a nearby tree, marking the number of prey caught. Over time, these rune trees have become living records of the hunter's prowess and respect for the land. Historians still argue whether these carvings were practical hunting records or held deeper spiritual significance, possibly serving as offerings or warnings to other hunters. You join a group gathered around a campfire where a retired warrior named Olaf recounts a tale of a great elk he pursued for days, only to find it calmly grazing beside his own camp. The story ends with a shared laugh, and a reminder that patience is as valuable as skill. The hunter's gear is a fascinating mix of old and new, iron-tipped arrows alongside carefully crafted bows made from yew, and cloaks sewn from animal pelts. The atmosphere is tranquil but tinged with the intensity of focused skill. A light-hearted competition unfolds. Who can shoot an apple off a volunteer's head from the farthest distance? You watch as the arrows fly, some hitting the target, others landing embarrassingly close to the volunteer's ears. The volunteer, of course, laughs through it all, demonstrating the camaraderie that persists long after the fighting stops. Hunting serves a dual purpose: sustenance and storytelling. Each expedition brings new legends, passed from one veteran to the next. The forest, in turn, becomes a sanctuary, a place where the old warrior can reconnect with nature and himself. As dusk falls, the hunters gather around the fire again, sharing steamy broth and smoked venison. The forest cools, shadows lengthen, and the rune trees seem to glow faintly in the twilight, as if watching over their keepers. You realise that for these warriors, the forest is more than just a resource. It's a living tapestry woven with memories, respect, and quiet strength. You step into a modest longhouse warmed by a low-burning hearth, where retired Viking warriors have taken up the quieter, yet equally challenging craft of farming. The scent of freshly tilled earth and the faint hum of livestock drift through the open door. You watch as men and women, some with the weathered hands of battle, others with softer features, tend to their fields and animals with deliberate care. Mainstream historical fact: farming was a backbone of Viking society, providing sustenance and stability. Many warriors, after years of raiding or exploring, returned home to cultivate the land, using the knowledge passed down through generations. A quirky detail emerges as you notice the unusual method some farmers use to protect their crops. Carved wooden scarecrows dressed in miniature armour, complete with tiny helmets and shields. These warrior scarecrows are meant to intimidate crows and other pests, blending Viking warrior symbolism with agricultural needs. Historians still debate whether these figures were widespread practical tools or more localised superstitions, but their presence speaks to the Viking knack for merging tradition with daily life. You observe the rhythms of farm life, the steady ploughing of fields, the gentle coaxing of calves, the rhythmic hammering of a smith forging farming tools. The transition from warrior to farmer is not just a change in occupation, but a transformation of pace and purpose. A retired warrior named Eric tells you about the seasons, explaining how the Vikings mark time not just by the sun and moon, but by the cycles of planting and harvest. His voice carries a warmth that contrasts with the tales of distant raids, emphasizing patience and care over speed and violence. Farming also brought communities together in new ways. Festivals celebrating planting and harvest became opportunities for storytelling, music, and shared meals. These gatherings were crucial in maintaining bonds long after swords were sheathed. You notice a subtle humour among the farmers too. Jokes about how some retired warriors tried to command cows as if they were soldiers, leading to predictable chaos. It's a reminder that the warrior's mindset doesn't fully fade even in the fields. As you watch the sun set behind rolling hills, the fields glow golden. The cycle of life continues, peaceful but purposeful, rooted deeply in the soil and the spirit of those who cultivate it. You find yourself wandering through a bustling Viking market town, alive with the gentle clamour of trade and chatter. Here, retired warriors have taken on the role of merchants and craftsmen, transforming their war-earned spoils into goods for sale or barter. The salty breeze carries the mingled scents of leather, wood smoke, and freshly baked bread. Mainstream historical fact: Viking trade networks were extensive, stretching from the British Isles to the Byzantine Empire, and many retired warriors found lucrative work as merchants or skilled artisans, leveraging their travels and contacts. A particularly curious practice catches your eye. Some former warriors keep exotic souvenirs, like walrus tusks, amber beads, or even preserved animal pelts, and display them proudly in their shops as symbols of status and adventure. These trophy stalls attract customers fascinated by faraway lands. Historians still debate whether these objects were primarily trade goods or carried deeper symbolic meaning, perhaps as talismans or reminders of survival. You watch a retired warrior skillfully carve intricate patterns into a wooden shield, repurposing his weapons into decorative art. Nearby, another weaves fine wool into textiles, quietly humming a tune learned from distant shores. The marketplace buzzes with lively bargaining, and you overhear tales of far-flung raids softened into amusing anecdotes about navigational mishaps and odd customs. The former fighters' voices are calmer here, their storytelling more reflective, layered with a gentle humour that invites you in rather than warns you away. One merchant explains how their new life requires patience and diplomacy. Far from the clash of swords, the war now is won with shrewd negotiation and keen eyes. You can't help but smile at the image of a burly berserker trying to haggle over a pile of furs with the subtlety of a diplomat. The market's rhythm is steady, a soothing backdrop to the warriors' new identities. The bright colours of cloth and glint of metal mingle with laughter and the clink of coins. Here, the past mingles with the present in a quiet celebration of resilience and adaptation. As twilight falls, lanterns flicker to life, casting a warm glow over the stalls. The warriors turned merchants close their day with contented sighs, their adventures now stories sold with a smile. You settle near the hearth of a modest Viking longhouse, where the oldest retired warriors gather in the evening's calm to share stories, wisdom, and the quiet company of peers. The flickering firelight casts gentle shadows across their faces, revealing lines carved by years of sun, sea spray, and hard living. Here, retirement is not a fading away, but a settling into a new kind of strength. Mainstream historical fact: elder councils were common in Viking communities, where seasoned warriors and chieftains offered advice and mediated disputes, maintaining social order in times of peace. A charming tradition surfaces, a game called narrated, a rough-and-tumble ball game combining elements of hockey and handball. While usually played by the young, the elders enjoy recounting memorable matches and joking about their less graceful attempts to join in, proving that age softens neither humour nor competitive spirit. Historians still argue whether narrated was primarily a sport, a training exercise, or a ritual with deeper societal meaning, but its role in community bonding is undisputed. You feel the comforting rhythm of these gatherings, shared laughter, the crackle of firewood, and stories that weave history with myth. The tales often revisit the retired warrior's more boisterous years, but here they are told with a gentle wink, a softness that invites you to rest rather than rouse. One elderly warrior, his voice low and steady, reflects on the strange journey from battlefields to hearthside, from conquest to quiet counsel. He notes how the restless energy that once fueled raids now finds peace in guiding younger generations and tending to the land and sea. As the night deepens, the fire burns lower, and the voices grow softer, the stories folding into a shared silence. You sense the enduring spirit of these Vikings, not as fierce invaders, but as resilient souls who have found new purpose beyond the sword. The warmth of the hearth and the steady presence of comrades create a perfect lullaby, inviting you to close your eyes and drift into dreams of distant seas, dense forests, and quiet villages bathed in twilight. As the fire's glow fades into the soft hush of night, you find yourself gently carried away from the vivid tales and lively lives of those retired Viking warriors. The restless clang of sword and shield has softened into the steady rhythm of their quieter days, where forests, fields, markets, and hearths hold their stories. Imagine the cool night air brushing softly past the wooden walls of the longhouse, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, mingled with distant waves gently lapping the shore. The shadows lengthen and merge, blurring the edges of your waking thoughts into the welcoming calm of sleep. Remember the rune-carved trees marking silent hunting triumphs, the warrior scarecrows standing guard over ripening crops, and the bustling markets alive with colourful trinkets from faraway lands. These images weave together into a tapestry of lives well lived, full of quiet courage, adaptation, and a touch of humour. Let your breathing slow, matching the peaceful cadence of the warriors' evening stories and soft laughter. Know that every ending is also a beginning, and in this stillness you are invited to rest and recharge as they once did. So as your eyes grow heavy and the night wraps you in its gentle embrace, carry with you the sense of resilience, transformation, and the soothing hum of a world settling down for the night. Good night, and may your dreams be as rich and peaceful as the lives we've wandered through together.